lesson when you go back there?
Well, I don't know if it's forbidden so much as it's a strong suggestion. A strong suggestion. One of the hardest things in this life to be is to be a fine human, right? Really, really hard to be. Lots of people pretend to be a fine human, and lots of those people call themselves priests and teachers and lecturers and doctors and mentors and millionaires and billionaires, and they say, I'm good, I'm great, I'm wonderful. And yet they're not, because they pretend and to be. And on this earth, we have the perfect opportunity, regardless of our perceived value or worth to society, to be a really good and honourable person. For instance, you don't have to lie. Sometimes you can withhold the truth, which in itself is a lie, but sometimes that is better than lying outright, and if you can get no help and it's a matter of you're going to starve or freeze to death and you find money, or you can run into a shop and grab a bag of chips and run out again, please run, grab, go. If they catch you, they'll put you in the lockup for the night and you've got a bed to sleep in, Does that make sense? It's really hard to make a commitment to somebody for the rest of your life. Really hard. But if you're going to break that commitment, be honest. Be upfront about it. If you are so angry that you are going to murder somebody, for God's sakes, walk away. And if you can't walk away, do as little harm as possible.
Is there such a thing as karma?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely there is karma. There is. And the higher up the scale you get, the quicker the karma is. You do a shitty thing and you're right up the scale, you are going to get slapped back down super quick, because the universe is going to throw temptation at us all the time. Every chance it can get, it's just going to throw temptation. Like, the higher up you get, the harder it gets, which is why I think so many people that we think are so amazing have such strong temptations thrown in front of them. Power goes to their head sometimes. They start believing press.
What about people that make an agreement to do harm?
Yeah, there are definitely people that do that.
And they've both made an agreement. I will come down and be your rapist, murderer, as part of this lesson that we're playing out. Does that happen?
Yeah, it does. I don't know how often it happens, but it does happen. I'll actually tell you a story that's not necessarily as bad as that. Definitely not as bad as that. That actually happened within my own family. And it was, guilt carries a lot. There's one of my sisters who had a very strong moral bandwidth, which she still does, and she's a beautiful person. But she ended up being intimate with her husband before they married, and she got pregnant from that. So she was actually pregnant when they married, and they had a little baby, and the little baby was born prematurely, and but they managed to get him to live. So he did, he lived until he was about 2.5. And then on Christmas Day, when this kid was 2.5, in a house full of, say, 20 adults and one other child, which was my son, this little kid fell into the family swimming pool and drowned on Christmas Day. And of course, they, after a long time, they managed to revive this kid, the ambulance, and so forth, but he didn't live. He died. And I believe, from the position that I'm in, that little boy, as beautiful as he was always at risk of not surviving, simply because of the guilt that his parents carried, and having, very strong religious backgrounds and whatever, and not having been married at the time that my sister fell pregnant. Not that they did anything wrong. It was them, their belief, and things that had been instilled in them from like day dot, and there's a lot more to my sister's story than that, but that is far enough for her. Never has God said that you will burn in hell if a human being doesn't bless your marriage. Right? There are plenty of people who've had really strong, solid marriages without any religious or civil act being passed over them. And just because, you don't have that bit of paper, does that mean that you're any less married if you have made a solid commitment to each other? In fact, some of the strongest marriages I've ever known have been unions with no formality. Like so many gay people. They get together, they marry, and they'll stay together, who knows, just as long as the person who was married by Father Bob in a Catholic church, or Rabbi Ben in a synagogue, or whatever, So humanity has a lot to say with that.
And you met your nephew when you were...
I did. I met that nephew when it's one of the things that can actually really distress me, because I met him. Like, his loss had a far-reaching and very, very deep impact on all of my family, and like on my son too, my eldest son, because they were closest friends, and they were very similar in age, and they really loved each other. And Harley had actually fallen into the same swimming pool a few months before, and fortunately I'd been there and I'd seen him, and I grabbed him out with like his foot and ankles still dry. I got there so fast and just went boom. So I took him to drown proofing for infants, and I had him taught how to swim, so if he fell in the water he would float and paddle, and in fact not to ever under any circumstances go into or near the water without mum. So when my nephew Jonathan drowned, it was only he and Harley at the swimming pool at the time, and Jonathan fell in, and Harley wouldn't go in to try and help him. Thank God, because it would have ended up both boys lost. Right? Instead, he threw in like a watering can and a couple of things, thinking that Jonathan would grab hold of them and float. And then when he couldn't do that, he ran off to find one of the adults there and told them that Jonathan was in the pool. So this is a 3-year-old kid going, Johnny's in the pool. And of course all the adults just ran to get him out. But it was the chlorine, it was a chlorinated pool. It was the chlorine in the end that killed him. The chemicals damaged too much. But, my son cannot swim. He cannot go into water, like the sea or a pool.
Because of that?
Yeah. He has showers off. Skis. And, he does parachute and whatever, but he can't swim.
So that's the trauma that he's
Yeah, that's one of the traumas that he suffers from, is that he lost his best friend in front of him at that age, at such a young age.
Did Jonathan have anything to say when you were in heaven? Did he pass on?
Asked me to tell his parents that he was okay and that he forgave them.